Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Kansas and Wichita government affairs and politics. Broadcast on Great Plains Television, that's channel 26.1, Sunday mornings at 8:30, repeated at 4 p.m., and then at 4:30 we'll give you last week's episode yet again. You can also find all the episodes of Wichita Liberty TV at my site, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org. Show notes for all the episodes, all the old episodes, plus all the other content that I and others create on nearly a daily basis. So today, first of all, co-host Carl Peterjohn, not here on Family Business, but we're starting our look at the candidates for the two candidates running to represent us in the United States House of Representatives starting in January. The 4th District, which we're in, covers the Wichita metropolitan area, plus counties going westwards all the way to Kiowa County, that's Greensburg, and Chautauqua County to the east, which is, I can't remember, but it's a pretty big thing, but definitely Wichita does dominate it. So today, our guest today is James Thompson. He is the candidate of the Democratic Party. He got there by winning the primary election in August, and now he's running against Representative Ron Estes, who run his party's primary in August as well. So James Thompson, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV.
Well, thanks for having me today. I'm excited.
Want to remind our voters that the last day to register is October 16th, the election Tuesday, November 6th. If you want to vote in advance, I think the best thing to do is to make a phone call to your county election office, and they'll get you started on how to get an advance ballot and go forward that way. But James, Mr. Thompson, tell us about why citizens in the 4th District should vote for you to be our next representative in Congress.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm a civil rights attorney and a U.S. Army infantry veteran, and I'm running for Congress because, quite frankly, I got tired of people on both sides of the aisle saying that they were going to do things. And never actually following through with that. They get up to Washington, they fight with each other, and then they listen to their lobbyists, but not to the people of the district that they represent. And I wanted to change that, which is one reason I don't take corporate PAC money at all, so that I don't have that burden on my shoulders to have to deal with. When I get up there, I'm going to be there to represent the people of my district. You know, I grew up in poverty, was actually homeless when I was a kid. And
Oklahoma, was it?
In Oklahoma City. And you know, that definitely gives you a different perspective on things. There were government programs that, but for those programs, I would not be here today. You know, free lunches, welfare. But I met a teacher who made me realize that I had to get educated, and I went in the U.S. military and the Army and served my time and got out and used the GI Bill to help put myself through school. And what I'm wanting to do is make sure that we protect those kinds of programs like the GI Bill, like free lunches, to make sure that stories like mine aren't done with, that we have the ability to make sure that these people have a hand up when they need it. It's there as a safety net to bounce them back up. Not for them to lay down in, but to bounce them back up and make sure that they're working hard. But if something happens in life, they can get the help that they need. I think a government that's responsive to the people is important.
Now, I noticed on your webpage, it's like a lot of them. You're going to fight for America, fight for this, fight for that. Representative Estes says that. All politicians say that fight. Why do we have to fight over things? Do you know, or is that fruitful?
Well, you know, the fight for America, for us, I mean, for me, I've sworn twice in my life to defend the Constitution. Once when I joined the military, once when I became an attorney. To me, fighting has been a part of my life because I had to fight and scratch and kick my way out of poverty. I didn't have people to provide me the income I needed to live while I was going to school. So I had to make sure that I was fighting to get ahead. And I want to make sure that I take that to Washington, D.C., that I am willing to fight if need be. I would much prefer that we sit down and have a nice conversation like you and I are having and discuss those issues. But if the time comes, I will stand up and fight for the people of this district. So Fight for America made sense for us. And boy, I mean, do you think that politics is getting worse, more polarized, more fighting? I mean, as we're, the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, it's not decided yet as we record this today, but they're fighting right now. Well, and unfortunately, I think that it is, Bob. I mean, I think that too often we want to put people in pigeonholes and box them in with a different label. Rather than actually having a discussion about policy or about the problems we have. And too often we want to draw a line in the sand and say, well, you don't agree with me on this one issue, So I'm not going to talk to you about the other 99 issues that we need to work on because we don't agree on one issue. It should work the other way. It should be, hey, we're going to work on these 99 that we can find some agreement on, and then we'll come back and argue on the last one when we're done solving the other problems. But we've seemed to have got that reversed. And a lot of it's media and the rhetoric that kind of gets thrown out there. We need to remember, I think, at the end of the day, that we're all Americans, that we all are trying to make a better place, to create a more perfect union.
It does seem like on television that conflict is more interesting to people than peaceful resolution. Our guest today was Lenore Skenazy, who's with the free-range parenting movement, and she talks about how everybody knows who Elizabeth Smart and Natalie Holloway are, children who met tragic ends, but they're just one of a billion, but they were on TV for years and years and years. So I think that sometimes distorts our perspective of things. We're going to take a commercial break right now. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. Bob Weeks, your host. Our special guest this week, James Thompson, who's running for United States Congress. I wanted to mention, I forgot to, that his opponent is, of course, Ron Estes, who's been on this show a number of times and will be again in the future. And I wanted to make sure that people understand that I have known Susan Estes, Mrs. Estes, for a number of years when she worked for Americans Prosperity, and we volunteered together on a number of things. So, it's probably going to be a pretty close call which party is in the majority in the next Congress. I mean, it's probably 50-50, I don't know. But what would be different if the Democrats, your party, were to take over a majority in the House of Representatives next year?
Well, I think that one of the things that we've seen is, well, we've seen the blue wave that's out there right now. We've seen, and that's traditional with any midterm election that goes against the party that's in power. But what I would like to see going in is that we're working on issues and we're reaching across that aisle, and I'm hoping that it causes people to maybe become a little bit more reasonable in dealing with each other so we can work together. Because whether it's Republicans in power now or Democrats in power, after this election, we have to work together. You can't do anything by yourself unless you have a majority of both houses and the White House. But sometimes even that, as we've seen with the Republicans, doesn't work because they can't agree amongst themselves sometimes. So hopefully we can start maybe building some different coalitions that includes Democrats and Republicans to actually get some things accomplished. And
I think Carl wanted me to be sure to ask, who do you think you'd vote for Speaker of the House if the Democrats are in power? I know there are Nancy Pelosi, who has been Speaker in the past, is Majority Leader now. I believe she's signaled her attention that she will run for Speaker again in the next Congress. But among some Democrats, well, Republicans use her to fundraise, of course, even among some Democrats, she's not very popular.
I want to be very clear. I am not going to be voting for Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House. I'd like to see I think it's time for a new generation to step up and lead there. And I'd like to see some of the things that I find important reflected in whoever leads us. In particular, the corporate PAC money is a huge thing for me. I think that too often our politicians are bought and paid for by corporate PAC money. And we need to move away from that and make sure that we are actually representing our district. As to who I would vote for, I don't know yet.
We don't know who the candidates are.
Well,
really
right,
yet.
Exactly. I don't know who the candidates are going to be, and I haven't met them personally. Until I get up there and I actually have a chance to speak to these people and find out who I feel comfortable giving my vote to, I don't know. The one thing I do know is I'm not going to be voting for Nancy Pelosi.
Okay. And another issue that's probably going to come up, especially if the Democrats do get the majority in the next Congress, is the potential impeachment of Donald Trump. How right now there's been resolutions for that, but with the Republicans being in the majority, they're not going to go anywhere. But if the Democrats were in the majority next Congress, that would be a real issue, wouldn't it?
Well, I think it's an issue that will be addressed. Now, I have a real problem with people on both sides of the aisle saying how they would or would not rule or vote on an impeachment issue, because until we actually have hard evidence sitting in front of us, it's inappropriate to be making those statements, because I very may well have to make that decision at some point here in the near future. And President Trump deserves a fair process, and saying that I would or would not vote one way or another is not giving him a fair process. That's prejudging without having seen evidence. When I get there, If that comes forward, I will look at the evidence that's presented to us and make a decision. I mean, I'm a civil rights attorney. Evidence is very important. So making sure that the decision whether or not to impeach is based on the actual evidence rather than political backroom deals is going to be very important to me. That's one of the reasons I ran. I'm tired of those political backroom deals.
Yeah. And I know for at least a lot of Republicans, President Trump can do no wrong. I have a more nuanced viewpoint that he's done some good things with some bad things. Considering the 4th District here in Wichita and our surrounding area, our unique characteristics, what are the bad things you think Donald Trump has done that have the potential to harm us?
The tariffs, I mean, that's got to be the first thing that you talk about, because our district is actually hurt more than any other district in the entire country, because we have agriculture and manufacturing as our two main economic drivers here. Those tariffs are damaging us, and we need to get them removed. Tariffs, in my opinion, need to be reverted back to Congress. Over the past 100 years, we've kind of delegated that authority to the president and given them more and more power, and I think that needs to be taken back by Congress.
I think a lot of people would agree that Congress has delegated an awful lot of authority to either the president or the executive cabinet agencies. I know a lot of bills are full of things like, and the secretary of whatever shall promulgate rules to implement this, and Congress just leaves it at that. Mike Pompeo is very critical of that.
It's lazy lawmaking. I mean, it really is. I mean, Congress's job is to pass the laws, not pass on that duty to someone else. And so that is one of the problems that we've got. We're electing people to go up and then turn around and just try to get reelected rather than doing the job that they're sent there to do. And part of that is understanding what's in the bills, passing the laws, and making sure that we're not allowing administrative overreach through these agencies or executive overreach by reducing the power that Congress has. So in answer to your original question, we need to roll back those tariffs. And if we're going to pass a tariff, it should go through Congress with Congress's approval.
Okay. We're at halftime so far, so let's take our second commercial break for Wichita Liberty TV, and we'll be right back in a moment. Back again for Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, your co-host Carl Peter. John not here today, but James Thompson, candidate for Congress, the Democratic nominee for United States Congress, running against Ron Estes. So, well, Donald Trump says, yeah, this trade war might hurt for a little bit, but we're going to win. Do you believe that at all? I mean, is it worth it to go through that, even if we did win?
Well, I don't think it's something that you want to do to start off with. I think, imposing tariffs is an aggressive action, and it's led to wars in our past, and so we need to make sure that
I mean, real shooting wars.
Real shooting wars, exactly. So we need to make sure that those kinds of things are going through Congress. Our farmers here, unfortunately, are expected to be the ones that take it in the chin and stand beside as they take it and say, "Oh yeah, I'm a good American, I'm going to take it." I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, I think that, why is it that Main Street is the one that suffers from these tariffs? Why are we hitting the people that we most depend on?
And I don't think that China has targeted aircraft in particular, but if they did, that would really either small aircraft or big commercial aircraft, because so much of what Spirit builds goes into Boeing products. That would really be harmful, I think.
Well, I think that they have targeted small aircrafts.
Okay.
I mean, if I remember correctly there. So, I mean, I think that they are definitely targeting different parts of the country to hurt and to hit probably at Donald Trump's base as well, I would imagine. We have to make sure that we try to level that playing field as much as possible. But I think imposing tariffs, particularly when we've now made our allies upset, is just bad policy, because we don't have a coalition of people to stand with this. It's us out on our own, and we shouldn't be in those kinds of positions.
Yeah. I think some news that was came out, I think, this summer is that Social Security will be spending more money than it's taking in this year through the Social Security taxes, the payroll taxes that everyone pays. do you see that as a problem, and what do we need to do about entitlements like Social Security and Medicare, which I think most people, well, the Congressional Budget Office sees them as huge drivers of the budget in the future?
Well, it is an issue that's got to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed now, not 10 years from now. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the way things are going right now, we're going to run out of money by 2032 or 2034, if I remember correctly. The things that we need to look at is, what's the purpose of Social Security? We've got a lot of seniors that have been paying in their entire life and have paid taxes on 100% of their income the entire time. It's not fair to them to take away that promise of that money being there.
And that's really what it is. It was a political promise. I mean, I have no contract with Social Security that says you have to pay me this. It's just that I paid in all my life, and in a couple of years, they've said they'd pay, but
Well, we want to make sure that we're protecting those amongst us that are least able to protect themselves, and we don't want to leave them out starving or anything like that. I think that the way that we do that is twofold. One, we need to grow our economy, create a bigger pie so that there's a bigger percentage of that pie that's being directed towards taxes without raising taxes. But I also think that we need to make sure that everybody that's out there is paying the same percentage of their Social Security tax out of their income. And right now we've got a cap at $128,000. So anybody that makes $128,000 or less are paying a tax on 100% of their income. Anybody that makes over that are paying a lesser percentage of their tax towards that benefit.
And that tax is a lot. I mean, really, it's 13.5% between the employer and the employee to get 13.5. Is that it, or about that?
I was thinking it was closer to 15 actually,
Okay.
but and that includes
In the
Medicare too.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like to see, and this would need studying, I'm sure, but maybe we lower the tax overall, but increase the amount of income that's covered in that, so that we can have, again, people that have paid in out of 100% of the income are still protected, and making sure that everybody else is also paying a share in as well that is commensurate with their income.
And in general, the Congressional Budget Office, I believe, predicts that the budget deficit is going to continue to rise over the years. It had started drifting downwards during the later years of the Obama administration, but now it's on a upwards trajectory again. Is that a problem that can be solved? What do we need to do there?
Well, it can be solved. I mean, we saw at the end of President Clinton's presidency, we saw surpluses. The question is, are we willing to do the things necessary to do that? There's two ways to go about that. Right now, we can either raise taxes, which nobody wants, or we can create a bigger pie. So how do we create the bigger pie? Creating the bigger pie, in my opinion, means making sure we have tax incentives for small businesses and workers as opposed to the big businesses that we see out there. And we need to have a tax reform done. Right now, we just passed the $1.5 trillion tax cut. Well, that's going to add to our deficit over the next 10 years because it was hastily done without sitting down and actually looking at the results or not caring about the results. I think that if we really truly want to get rid of that, we need to also look at our spending in the government. The way that Clinton did it is we looked at the military and we made sure that our military was protecting us, but we weren't getting involved in wars everywhere. We've been involved in a war now for 17 years, longer than any other in our history.
Yeah, there was kind of a peace dividend at the end of the Clinton years, but unfortunately that didn't last very long. Hold on to your ideas there, because we are going to take our last commercial break for today. We'll be right back in just a moment. Well, back again for our last segment of Wichita Liberty TV today. Bob Weeks, your host. James Thompson, Democratic candidate for United States Congress from the 4th District of Kansas, is our guest. So we were just mentioning there was kind of a peace dividend at the end of the Clinton term. You know what there also was then? There was a Democratic government, a president, I should say, and a Republican Congress. So there was kind of a gridlock there, and I think that had something to do with not advancing spending plans so much.
Well, I think more the thing that had the most to do with it over the last 20 years is the fact that we are seeing our deficit increase, we're seeing our debt increase because of wars that we're getting into around the world. I mean, when I swore to protect the Constitution, I swore to protect the Constitution of the United States. I didn't swear to protect the whole world. We should not be getting into wars around the world and having military involvement in those wars unless there's American land or lives at stake.
And I think even John McCain in his later years came to realize that some of those wars in Afghanistan, I don't remember which one he said exactly, was a mistake in retrospect. And of course, he was all in favor of these wars.
Well, we have to protect our military, and we need to have good funding for our military. But when you are in these wars, you're expending more than just the funds for the military. You're expending to be actively engaged in war, and we've created a wartime economy which is running on a deficit, and we can't continue to do that. We need to make sure that we're pulling back any kind of expansion of our military so that we can be in all these different wars. We need to bring our boys and women home and make sure that we're only getting involved, like I said, when we have an actual American interest at stake.
I think one of the positions I noticed on your website, or maybe I've heard you say it, is the idea of Medicare for all as a solution to our health problems. Is that right? And did I characterize that accurately? And how would that work?
Well, what I'd like to see is some common sense and competition put into what we've got here. We've got a healthcare system that's broken. Everybody, I think, agrees on that. The question is how do we fix it? What I would like to see is a Medicare available to anyone who wants to buy into Medicare, so that they have the ability to purchase that. It would be cheaper than what they're paying for private insurance because of the costs of Medicare. The overhead is only 3%.
And I think this is oftentimes called the public option, is that right?
It can be called that sometimes, but I would want to see that available to compete with the private industry as well. We've been saying for years that private's always better than government, and then we've heard, well, government can be better than private. Well, let's force both sides to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and see which one's going to drive down the cost the most. If the private industry can get their costs under control, great. We can drive that down enough to where people will want to be in that. Or they'll want to be in the Medicare program where you can get it done cheaper there. But all of this is going to require that we reform Medicare, which means that we get rid of this inability to negotiate out of drug prices or medical device prices.
So this would be not patients, but the government negotiating those prices. Is that right?
The government negotiation, using that position to negotiate out drug prices.
The big market power of the huge Medicare.
Right. But I mean, you would also have the insurance companies, allowed to take that as well, so that they can, they're not getting driven out just because of that. I think that creating that competition truly goes back to a free market economy, because right now what we have, though, is insurance companies that have created monopolies in states. We've got one in our state right now under the ACA. We haven't opened up our borders. I think that would be another good part of that as well.
State borders.
State borders,
okay,
right.
So that we would be able, as someone who buys his own insurance, I'd be able to buy a policy in Colorado, let's say.
If you could get that in Colorado, great. But I think expanding the options to everybody and making everybody compete, including the government, will do wonders for that. And it would also help Medicare, because as you were just mentioning, Medicare and Social Security are having problems. Opening up Medicare where people could buy into that would pump a lot of money into that, with also a lot of healthy people in that pool, so that money's going in, but you're not going to have as many people that need care percentage-wise, and would extend the funding of Medicare and actually help it. So.
Now, what I worry about, though, is that Medicare, any sort of expansion of that is an expansion of a government health care program. We have a government health care program that doesn't do very well. I think something that you agree is important, and that would be the Veterans Administration.
The Veterans Administration and TRICARE can be better, but I also know a lot of veterans that are happy with the system that they have. Now, just because we can point out problems doesn't mean it's not a good thing. I mean, because I can point out problems with insurance as well. The universal denials the first time somebody submits a claim, or refusing to cover needed medical procedures, etc. There's problems with all of these systems, and we can't just say, oh, well, there's a problem with TRICARE, so that it doesn't work. When obviously it does, because we've had a lot of veterans that have been involved in that system. A lot of veterans get the care that they need, but there are definitely problems there. I lost my brother-in-law as a result of PTSD because he didn't get the care he needed. But I think that there are improvements that can be made, and we can make those.
And certainly we've made a promise to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, whatever, that you serve and we're going to take care of you. And we haven't always done that very well, I think. So that's a problem.
Well, that's exactly right. If we've got enough money to go to war, we sure as hell ought to have enough money to take care of them when they come home.
You know, libertarians, the Cato Institute has an idea that when we go to war, for every soldier, we front load and pay now their costs of their care through private insurance. So that would be you know, an analysis of the risk of death or dismemberment or whatever, and just pay for it right now. That way we wouldn't have these lingering costs of war, and perhaps the veterans could get better care. But you know what, James? They are going to turn out the lights on us here. So, James Thompson, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much,
today.
Bob. I appreciate it.
So, as you know, the opponent is Representative Ron Estes, who will be making an appearance shortly. And other than that, Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, and we hope to see you again next week.